Hi, Grandpa. After my last transmission, I noticed you're starting to look for other voices, people from your own time, to help you make sense of the messages I'm sending. I'm seriously trying my best to make my transmissions as accessible as possible for someone living 100 years ago. But sometimes it's hard to remember every concept and every technology you didn't know back then. So honestly, I love the idea of you reaching out to brilliant minds from your time to help fully grasp what I'm trying to share. Look for someone called Bram Kanstein. Back in your time, he was deeply woven into the tech world and especially into Bitcoin. I saw that he even created a podcast called Bitcoin for Millennials. It wasn't just about the technical side. He explored how Bitcoin would ripple into consciousness, into society itself. He interviewed almost all the major thinkers shaping Bitcoin's early narrative. From what I can feel, his work could be a bridge for you, a voice from your era, already pointing towards the world I'm living in now. Hi, Grandpa. I want to tell you about something that happened a few weeks ago, something that left a deeper mark than I expected. It was the day Riven left for Ethereum, the Martian citadel. Riven is my partner, a systems thinker and navigator of regenerative architectures. We met during a council exchange between Nodia and Oasis 7. Every 2 years, Earth and Mars align just right to allow for low-energy travel, what we call the transfer window. It's not just astronomy here. It's logistics, emotions, and choices, all condensed into a tiny crack of possibility. Riven took it, and I stayed. 3 nights later, lying under the solar veils in Nodia's sky garden, I started doing the math. 92 days. That's how long I had before the window closed again. I rerouted my monthly sats, trimmed food down to nutrient blocks, even took extra workshops for reputation boosts, all to try and save enough to reach him. But it wasn't enough. The only way was to sell Anayi and Pharaoh, my 2 garden robots. They weren't just tools. They were woven into my days, remembering things even I forgot. They are home. Standing in my spiral kitchen, staring at the ledger, I realized if I sold them, I could make it in time. I could actually even buy a hyperjet ticket and have the traveling time. I could buy time. And it hit me. Money isn't just stored energy. It's compressed possibility, a way to stretch or squeeze time itself. If I had more sats, I could have more now. It made me wonder, are the truly wealthy not just richer, but closer to their futures? I didn't take the flight. Money is energy that can bend time. But maybe real wealth is knowing when to move and when to be still. Today I'm spending the morning tending the kitchen garden, hand-turning the soil myself. It feels good. I'll send my next message in about a week. Maybe after the early tomatoes start to ripen. Sending love until next time. Bye.
So, Bram, welcome on the show. Thank you very much for your time. And I hope this message was not too complex and mind-bending.
No, very cool. Very cool. Yeah, thanks for inviting me, man. I'd love to chat. I think it's really hard to look at the future, and I think this was actually very well made. It made me think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. So what I need to point out at the very beginning for everybody watching that episode is I went into the Bitcoin space, I guess October last week. So it's last year. So I guess actually the very first show or podcast I've ever watched was your Bitcoin for Millennials. And I ended up, I guess I told you when we met in person, about 90 episodes. So you were like really, you were my starting point into the Bitcoin rabbit hole. So what I want to point out at the very beginning is a big thank you. So this was actually amazing.
It's still crazy to hear that you can do that on the internet, but I appreciate it. And I mean, that's the whole. If you would be the only person that I've helped along the way, it's enough, you know. And I think I know it's many more people now along the way, but it's crazy that you can reach so many people with the things that you do on the internet, but also that how I know that how I talk about it doesn't reach everyone, right? So it only reached the people that can receive it in that way, and so it's really special to hear that every time. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think what really made me, let's call it, stay in the Bitcoin realm is that I saw some people on your show, especially like Toma. I had him on the show, who really saw the very different dimensions and spiritual dimensions as well of Bitcoin and how it will transform society. And I'm talking about that. So what June said in the transmission is that money could bend time and money could buy time. So taking that phrase alone is way too complicated to start, I guess. So I would start with a question we both are at least a little bit familiar with. When you say money can bend time, let's start with what is money? And you talk about that a lot.
Yes.
Do you have anything in mind that is, your latest version of what it could be?
That's a good addition. Yes, the latest version. I think this is what another Bitcoiner, Robert Breedlove, says a lot, right? Like, what is money is the defining question of our time. It's we are seeing that it's broken, but many people don't really understand it, right? So you kind of, when you ask yourself the question, what is money? It's actually pretty overwhelming, I think, because for many people, the first realization is probably, I don't really know. You know, it's these bills or coins, or it's my plastic card that I swipe, and then I get something in, you know, the thing that I want in a store or online or whatever, right? And when we grew up, we would just get some coins or a bill and go to a store and give that to the person in the store and get something in return. And then as a child, you would think like, okay, apparently this is money, right? The definition of, you know, these coins or bills that you were using to buy a lollipop or a bread or whatever. But I've learned along the way, after talking to many people, that even people with a double master's in economics have never learned what money is in their study, for example, right? So it's not weird that many people don't really know what money is. So I think it's good that you said, what's your latest definition or understanding? I'll try to be brief. So what I think money is a tool that is used on as a reward in a value exchange, right? I do something for you. I have a certain offer that aligns with your wants or needs or desires or whatever, and that is something that you want. So I do that for you, or I create that for you. I deliver that to you, and in return, you give me money as a reward. And you give me money as a reward because we don't barter anymore, right? So back in the day when there were like small communities, you had people barter. And, you know, if I would make bread and you would grow bananas, for example, we would trade one of my breads for 6 or 5 or 4 or whatever our deal was of your bananas. But as trade became more distributed, also because people got invented the wheel, right? And they have carts and they could bring their bananas to another place or their breads to another place. So like people got more connected. Money started to develop because it wasn't that every time you wanted a bread, I also wanted bananas. Basically, that's called the coincidence of one. So something eventually was created as an abstraction for the product or service that's purchased, and the reward that was being paid for that. And so for me, money is a tool that you use as a reward in a value exchange, and because when I sell you a bread, you give me money. I can use that money to buy peaches or apples or someone who cleans my windows or whatever. So I can. It's like an abstraction eventually, like deeper down, of productivity, because I have to use ingredients, I have to bake, I have to wait, I have to knit the dough, or when I'm a carpenter, I have to expend my energy and build a shed or a wall or whatever. And so if you go further down, like one layer, where the layer on top would be a value exchange, we exchange something between us. How does that come about? The thing that I create, the product or the service that I deliver to you. And eventually that comes down to energy or energy and time. I once watched a podcast of Aubrey Marcus with Nate Hagens, and they talked about energy. They didn't talk about Bitcoin, but they talked about energy. And Nate Hagens said, if you look around you, like everything that you see costs energy to create or maintain.
True.
So, I have the cabinet here, that's wood. The wood came from a tree. The tree grew from, light from energy from the sun and the rain, etc. And eventually someone chopped that down and they put it in a machine, or they used a saw and they chopped it up and someone put this together. But eventually that is for everything you see. And when I heard that, I thought, okay, so the energy that is used to create something is expended in a certain amount of time, right? So the person making this cabinet took a certain amount of time to create the cabinet and a certain amount of energy. And so when you think about it like that, it's energy expended in a certain amount of time, which is basically your productivity as the human who creates a product or a service. So if you look at it like that, basically money should represent energy and time, or time, something finite. And so I still hope that this is an answer, but that's kind of how I look at it now. It's basically a representation of your productivity, because you have to do work to create a certain product or service. And what you get rewarded in is basically an abstraction, an amount, a certain amount of units of the currency that you're using. But at the base layer, I see it as an abstraction for that productivity or that energy, that time, that was used to construct the thing. Because if I eventually want to spend that money on something else, that also costs energy in time to create. And that's also eventually where the problem comes from. If you are using units of a currency that are worth less and less every day, that eventually translates to your time being stolen. Because if you buy something from me and I have these units of a currency and I want to save them up to somewhere in the future spend them on whatever I want to spend it on, if each unit that I've saved up has degraded in value, then basically my time that I already gave away in creating the product or the service that I sold to you is in that sense stolen from me. So I hope that's an answer to the question.
Yeah, and I think to wrap that up, what's very important is encapsulated in the thing we call money is physical energy, your labor, and time. So at least two components, right? Encapsulate into a new thing.
Yes.
We now call money, right?
Yeah.
And I think what's very interesting, you are into Bitcoin now for over 10 years, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Right. And what's very interesting is people are for a very long time into that topic, Bitcoin, of finances, and most people don't have a one sentence answer. And I think it's very important to see that. And this is like the very first sign that it's not as simple as we maybe were told. to like really be open and to digest all the different information on that topic. And the other thing is, I think you have different perspectives, right? One perspective would be somebody who has a startup. One perspective would be if like I like the spiritual component of that. So what I think, I guess you mentioned Robert Breedlove as well. So there is a very, very famous series, right, from him. What is money? The first things he is talking about the energy part of money at the very beginning for, I guess, 18 hours, something like
Yeah,
that,
something like
right?
that. Yeah.
Discovering that. I listened to that, and I think energy is really, from my point of view, the only explanation that is cool for the scientific view on money, but also like the spiritual part. So energy is something you can really work with, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's also something that I realized in my early 30s, actually much later. This is actually how I always saw money. But it took me Bitcoin to actually understand it for myself. So I always saw money or having a certain amount of money as a tool to actually buy time to figure out what's next. So I've never really been someone that, and I would never will be someone who's gonna have a job for, you know, the same job for 40 years or something. Like I have very broad interests and have had many things, you know, ideas that came along that I wanted to explore. And I always realized, well, if I want to take a chance on something, or if I want to actually have time and space, like physical space, but also mental space to explore a certain idea, then I need money for that to survive, just literally, right? And I think later I realized that that also kind of primed me to eventually understand Bitcoin, because what I now see about Bitcoin is that because it's a money that is not where it's not possible to debase it, right? So you cannot inflate the supply and thereby debase the value of all the existing units. It actually buys you time towards the future, because less and less will be available in the future. So if you have Bitcoin now and you understand that over time, and that's also something we've seen in history, people gravitate towards the stronger money, you know that more people will adopt Bitcoin, and that the value of Bitcoin, so not the price, right? The price I call an exchange rate. So a few years ago, you needed $10,000 units to buy one Bitcoin. Now that we're recording, it's like $105,000 units to buy one Bitcoin. So the dollar is in this case the weaker currency. So if you know that more and more people will eventually store their energy in Bitcoin, and that over time the same amount of Bitcoin will actually have an increased purchasing power and buys you more, you, by buying Bitcoin now, are actually creating time and space in the future. And in other words, kind of like lowering your uncertainty towards the future, because no one literally knows how much time they have in their life, right? So there is like a natural anxiety towards the future, because you just don't know how much time you have. But if we stick with the concept of acquiring an amount of units of a money to create time and space to do something, to invest it, whether in yourself or a family or a home or a new job or a career, or, you know, whatever you would want to do that will cost you some time, that is really hard with fiat money, with a currency that loses value. Because if you start accumulating more units and you want to save for the next 5 years, for example, but after 5 years these units have lost 50% of their value, then you actually lower or increased your uncertainty towards the future instead of lowering it. And that I would say, goes against the natural anxiety. Like you have the natural anxiety towards the future, but if there's a man-made thing that increases your anxiety towards the future, that in itself, at least for me, is not doesn't make any sense. Like, why would we accept a man-made thing to increase our uncertainty towards the future? What if there's a man-made thing that actually lowers our uncertainty towards the future, which in essence also makes us, I would argue, be more aware of the time right now, so that your head is, if your anxiety towards the future is lower, you're also able to live more in the now and experience the time of now, right? Instead of worrying about the future and not being here in the now.
And so you said 7 times now in your reply, time. So you said the term time, over and over and over again. And for what's very important, and you actually, you said, like, literally, I always saw money as
Money
a
as
tool
time.
to buy time.
Yes.
Actually, exactly the thing that June said in the transmission, right? So for both of us, we talked about that a lot. And you made, like, what are you now into, like 130 episodes? I don't know. You talked about it a lot. For people
Yes.
who didn't spend that much time talking about that topic, it's 2 things. So at the very beginning, we talked about you expand energy and you use your time, right? You expand it and you compress it in something.
Yes.
We call money.
In the reward. Yes.
And then what's very interesting, then you use that compressed time to expand your time horizon.
Yes.
Again. So time is actually tied to money. You can't separate both, right? So it's a technology that can actually compress your time, bend your time. It can change time.
But the big problem here is that if we agree by using our free will that, I'm going to build deliver a certain product or service to you, and I ask $1,000 units for that, and you say, well, what you offer is what I want to have, but I want to pay $800 units for that. And then I say, well, no, I can do it for 900 or something. And you say, okay. Then we shake hands. At that exact moment in time, we have an equal exchange conceptually, right? I offer A, and you give me reward B, and reward B is these $900 units. So then I get to work. Maybe I work for a week. I don't know. I built something in your garden, right? I built something. I work for a week. I get wood and materials and whatever I need. I built. I always share like a shed in your garden. That's always my example. I don't know why. I built a shed in your garden. I spend a week of time and a week of energy in that time, and deliver you that shed. And at that moment, you give me the $900 units. And so all that time
is compressed.
It's
in that money.
In a concept, conceptually,
in a concept,
right?
Yeah.
In reality, so actually, the time I spend is gone. So that's why, as a concept, that the time in the reward is a very important concept, right? Because that's what you're giving me, so I can take that and spend it on something else that represents that packaged energy in that money, right? But whether I want to do that like right now after you pay me, or next week, or in 5 years, should not really matter.
So, sorry, you can store that energy. It's again about time. You transport your own time, actually. You already spent into that concept.
To spend it on someone else's time later at a whatever point. Yes.
Right. So,
but the problem is that there is a third party that influences the how do you say, well, the strength of the money that we are using to, compress or package or represent or abstract that time in however you want to call it, right? And there's a third party that can create more units of the dollars in this example without expending any energy. They can just press a button and then more units come into existence. And so if more units come into existence, that if you just see the supply of money units as an amount of units on this side, let's say a scale, right? You have a scale with an amount of units of a money, and on the other side you have an amount of products and services. If the weight and the amount of the money units becomes heavier, the price, the amount of units that are asked for products and services goes up. So if I get 900 dollar units from you right now, and let's say I want to spend that in a year on a home, then in reality, the actual rate of inflation is probably like 9 or 10%. That's, the real rate of inflation. Let's say 10%. It will only buy me 810, something that represents 810 dollar units. So in that year, 10% of the time that I spend on making this shed for you, what that represents as a purchasing power, what I could buy with that, is inflated away outside of my control or your control. So it didn't really matter that we agreed on doing a value exchange in supposedly total freedom, that the tool that we're using to represent the reward side in that exchange, that we freely, negotiated on, right? That is losing it. That is losing its value. And so what I always say is like that. If once you understand that, just that concept, you also, or you should, I think you should understand that that's the dumbest trade that you could ever do, because that time that I spent that week building the thing for you is gone forever. My whole goal is to acquire something that is an honest representation, right? Yeah. Or a real reflection of that work. Plus, as some people are critical of this because there's like, I think it's like a communist theory or something is called like the theory of labor, where they say like the amount of labor put into something should represent the value. What we're talking about, touches that a bit, but because we have a free opportunity to negotiate an amount of units, right? I said I think my work is worth 1,000. You said 800, and then we agreed upon the 900, right? So there's no third party that sets that price. Like it's us. Like if there's three other guys that can also build a shed in your garden, and one says 700, doesn't mean that you agree with that just because it's less, right? Maybe my presentation was better, or my reviews, or whatever. There's like on more Yelp. That goes into
on Yelp.
On Yelp. Yeah, but there's more that goes into what my actual proposition is worth. But the point is more that the tool we use, the units of a money, to represent the work, the products or services that are being delivered, that becomes worth less over time. So it buys me, the person that earned the money, less over time. And so that's basically how my time gets stolen, my time that I already expended.
And I think one concept is already quite hard to understand. So that time is included in money. You can't separate it. What we are now talking about is if you had a solid monetary system and it was stable, it's already hard to understand, right? And now you take a system where there can be created new tokens, coins, whatever you call it, units of account. So you could actually translate that into, if you create more of these, there is a party that could artificially increase the amount of time, lifetime in a system And this is where you see like it doesn't make any sense because nobody could do that. There are a lot of like very powerful people, but nobody can create time. As far as I know, I don't know, but as far as I know, nobody knows that so far. So there is a party by printing money that at least pretends to create time.
Yes,
this is weird.
Yes, this is an amazing point. So there are people. So why is this happening? Why is this happening, right? Why are more units of a money being created? And you and me, just general humans, like any human, by the way, why does our time get stolen?
Our time is finite, right?
Yes, but you know, if it's packaged in the money, right? Mm-hmm. This is happening because there are other people that are, you know, not more valuable or smarter or more different than us. They have an opportunity to, even unwillingly, corrupt the man-made system of money that we are using. The people that are close to the creation of new money, which benefit the most from that's called the Cantillon effect. So these people, usually the governments, right? Because they can borrow money from banks, and the banks create the money at the cheapest rates possible. They usually have that those newly created units of money before they are actually spent in the economy. So no one actually knows that those units exist. And when they are spent in the economy, then you actually see that the amount of money has risen, right? The amount of units, which devalues all the existing units. So what you're saying is interesting. There are people in this world, again, people no smarter than you and me, or more privileged or whatever.
I would argue somehow they are smarter because they create that.
That is true. That is true. Yeah. Well, I think they are not that. Well, eventually, I think they will be the last to adopt Bitcoin. So in that sense, they're less smart. But they can actually create money units without expending any energy, and they can actually spend it on stuff that for which already energy was expended and time. So in that sense, they are, time travelers or bending time. In that sense, they are, they can basically steal time and energy from other people.
And this by itself, if you go to this philosophical level of money being time, this I think that really shows like how weird that situation is. So let's say you have, to make it simple, you have 100 years of your life. This is finite. And you can spend that and you get money, and there are just people who can create like 1 million years by the press of a button. And you spend like maybe 1 year on a project, and they give you that time you can compress into money without doing any effort. And this is like really weird, and it gets like really sci-fi if you think of like there are people creating time and stealing time.
I found a video. I don't know if I can share it, but I think
I don't know. We could try it.
Yeah, you should. This is perfect. I'm gonna see if I can share it, and we can hopefully add it. Okay. Yes. Perfect. Do you see? Is it now really big? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Listen to this.
Thinking is an institutionalized system of time theft, because ultimately the fruits of your labor are a product of your time or energy, right? Time and energy used synonymously here. We printed $6 trillion in 2020, right? In the US. The average annual US salary is $60,000 roughly. That's 100 million years stolen, right? Through the counterfeiting of currency. If each human works from the age of 20 to 70, so that's about 50 productive years per human, the counterfeiting of $6 trillion USD equals the stealing of 2 million human lives worth of productive labor. Right? This is to try to make it real, like it's a real massive problem. And then, of course, the plausible deniability that's built into inflation, right? It's Putin's fault. It's Beyonce's fault. It's the supply chains. It's everything but the central bank. So again, we're back to that romantic lie, the deception and the stealing going hand in hand. I think this is hopefully what we can deliver as Bitcoiners, is pulling back the veil on this bullshit.
Yeah. So what is so crazy is that what he's sharing, right? Like to the productive, like 2 million fully productive lives. So the people that can do this are usually the government, because they have great ideas and people vote for great ideas, right? Mm-hmm. But when you create this money, everything you do with it is basically artificial. Mm-hmm. Like no real productivity went into the creation of the things you're buying with the money. So you can say like, oh, I am richer because I have more units of a money. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean there are actual productivity gains that come from that money. Does that make sense? So what he means is the veil is, you see a chart that goes to the right and up, and the letters or the numbers are green, and there's a little plus in front of it, right? And people think like, oh, that is growth. We are doing really, really great. But that is not real productivity. It's fake. Mm-hmm. And so the veil is the fact that many people and many politicians are looking at it in a nominal way, but not in real productivity. But eventually someone has to do something in the physical reality to create value. Mm-hmm. And when you can just, and this is also why, the whole concept of the US dollar being the global reserve currency is the most brilliant scam in the world, is they are creating money by printing a button, and they are buying oil in Saudi Arabia. They are buying something that is tangible and real, and in this physical world that you can use and refine to expend real energy. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. And they have gotten the dollar to a point where the whole world is trading in dollars that they can just create. So there's all these dollars, all these units sloshing around in the world, but there's one country that can just make more units and thereby devalue all the other units in the world. So all these other people, so this is like a different level of the Cantillon effect, right? So there are people in America that suffer from poverty, which is one level, but America or the US is actually able to impoverish the rest of the world by exporting their inflation even further than their own citizens, if that makes sense, right? And so, yeah, I think we'll keep it at that. But what this was Robert Breedlove, right? Like what he explained there, you are artificially creating productivity in a nominal way that is not represented in the physical world. There are not 2 million people that magically spend 50 years of productivity in 1 week or something, right? Like that is just not possible. Yeah. But that is actually what is happening, and to a degree that works, right? To a degree it works. I mean, if you look at, America is 250 years old. There is only actually probably one way why they became so big in 250 years is because they co-opted the money. That's the only way to grow really, really fast. But eventually, now that you see, I don't know what the number is when we're recording, but like 37 trillion in debt, there are more and more buyers of the American debt that are slowly realizing that, yeah, this is never going to be paid back. Well, why would they go back to 30 trillion in debt if they can go to 39 trillion in debt, which is actually a very relevant discussion right now. In the time of recording, they are talking about the American debt ceiling and stuff like that. So America will never default because they can endlessly create their money, and there's only a select group of people that can actually profit from that, and anyone else, whether in the US or in the rest of the world, will be a victim of that.
Yeah, and to be clear on that, this is no podcast about politics, but like you said, it has an effect.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. It doesn't matter who's the president, red or blue or whatever. This is for every Democratic or Republican Party in charge, by the way.
And what I think what's really interesting, we both live in Europe, and a lot of people have a very strong picture of Europe, I think. And if the dollar is inflated, we suffer as much as any African country, just by a different degree, right? So we are not independent from that system. That's like very important to understand. And if we take it back a little bit to the science fiction world.
To add something to that, we are only lucky. We are lucky that we live in the euro area, right? Yeah. And other people are lucky that they live in the US dollar area. But in all the parts of the world, there is this concept of fiat money, right? The money by decree of a government. And that is no different in Europe or the US or whatever. We are just lucky that we have a stronger currency than in other countries. Like, for example, in Lebanon, they have crazy inflation. This is also fiat money. There are people that rob banks in Lebanon to get their own money. They don't even want other people's money. They want their own money from the bank. And when you see that and you think like, whoa, that is really insane. Or, in Venezuela, where they have, like all the bills on the street and they light fire with the money. Have you ever seen that? Like, they just use the paper money because it's worthless to create fires. Mm-hmm. Same system. There is no difference, right? So once you realize that, like, that should frighten you. Yeah,
it's just by degree, right?
Yes. So we are really lucky. Yeah.
And and again, if you see that there are a lot of podcasts about that, like central banking system. Everybody can look that up. But the scale of that monetary system, especially with the petrodollar, right, around the globe. And again, going back to the more philosophical question of time theft, this is just so amazing that you can have your hands on actually the lifetime of people. I think this is just like really, really amazing. And I'm going to ask you probably the most difficult question I could ever ask in this podcast, because we talk about that and we said like, okay, let's clarify at the very, very beginning, what is money? And we go into money and say, okay, we split it up. It's like one part energy, one part time. So we have two new components we can't define as well, but let's try. Just let's try. I think it's very hard. Do you have any concept of what time actually is? You know that moment when you try to explain Bitcoin to friends and family, and 30 seconds in, they are already rolling their eyes. Yeah, same here. And still, I felt this is one of the most important conversations of our time. So I started wondering, how can we make this beautiful, radical idea accessible to the people we love? That's why I wrote Unfuck Money. Not about price charts, not about tech. It's about money as life energy and how the system we live in quietly drains it. Unfuck Money is the simplest, most mind-expanding guide to why things feel off, and how Bitcoin might just change everything. Written for people into spirituality, self-growth, and truth, not spreadsheets. This isn't just a book, it's a bridge. A way to show your partner, your mom, your best friend why Bitcoin isn't just internet money, but a peaceful revolution. Go to unfuck-money.com and learn more and get the book on Amazon as paperback or Kindle. And if you've heard of Bitcoin but still have no real idea what it is, yet something in this message speaks to you, then this book might be exactly what you've been waiting for. Because I think it will change our world even more than the invention of the internet. Unfuck your money, reclaim your energy. This is the smallest question of all.
I will try to tie it back to what we're talking about. If you go to my X account, I have this header shot that says 1 liter, 1 meter, 1 kilogram, 1 Bitcoin. And I could add an hour, a minute, a second, right? I think something like time. So my current, I have a friend who says you shouldn't say belief anymore. So I'm not going to say belief. He says, what I find the most probable is that, and I think you agree, right? When I say like you are a spiritual being having a physical experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are a soul in a spirit in a meat suit, basically. And the meat suit has brains that are basically a computer that help you through, literally the lenses in your eyes to make sense of whatever this reality is created by, whether that's light and vibration or
Mm-hmm.
wherever you are in your understanding of that, right? Like this is what I'm thinking. And so you are not your body, you have a body. You are not your brain, you have a brain, right? Like all the thoughts come from the brain. They are not you, you are not your thoughts, right? And so what I think time is just a way for you in the meat suit, something that the people came up with to quantify the endless movement that we're in. It's a label, like the color label, right? Like if I ask you what color is this, you say green, I say green because this spectrum of light we determined has the label green. But your experience or your processing of this light spectrum is different from my processing of that light spectrum, right? So by definition, our experience of the reality is not it is just not the same. But we need certain labels to have some coordination in operating in a reality with other people that are also experiencing the reality. That's a long intro to the answer, but I think in that sense, time is a similar type of label where we have used words and some sort of standard to help us make sense of so this is my understanding now, from the movement that we're in, basically, because conceptually or philosophically, it's always the now, right? Like and it's also a funny idea. If you don't see, if I move this from here to there, I once saw someone say that is time traveling. Like I'm putting it back in the future, and now I'm putting it back in the future again, right? Because that's a crazy thought. I love that.
Okay,
or the example
that.
of standing in a river, right? Yeah, it's just like this is the now, and this is the future, and I time traveled to the future, right? And now I'm time traveling the hat back into or forward to the future, basically. And it's the same as with the example of when you are standing in a river on one day, and then you stand in the river later, like it's not the same river, not the same person, or something like that. Right?
You can, what was the quote? You can only step in a river once, or something like that.
Yeah, it's something like that. I don't know the exact
because you changed and the river changed.
Yes.
And so time is some sense of flow, continuous flow.
Yes.
At least that is the concept that helps us to grasp what it could be. And at
what this guy talks about. So this is I showed this to you. It's called "Stalking the Wild Pendulum" by Itzhak Bentov. He looks like this. And there's a great video on YouTube called From Atom to Cosmos, where there's an interview with him.
Yeah, I guess you need to turn around and talk into the microphone, otherwise it's very hard.
And there's a great video on YouTube that is called From Atom to Cosmos, where there's a great interview with him, and afterwards there's a lecture of his work done by his wife, because he died in like the 70s or something, in a plane crash. And what he explains what time is that in the bigger scale, we are moving, right? We are on this rock in space that is just moving, and it's constantly moving and moving and moving in different cycles over different amount of years, different amount of how do you say that? Like just different degrees, basically, in levels. And so time comes from the fact that there is a movement. First, I'm here. Now I am there. How do you measure the movement of going somewhere? And so it's a really long answer to what is time, but I think it's a great question. I think time is a tool to make sense of the movement. That's basically it, right? So in 365 days, we do a certain movement. In 24 hours, we do a certain movement. In 28,000 years, we do a certain movement, and you can zoom out and zoom out and zoom out, basically. Yeah. Is that an answer to your question?
I didn't expect that we nail it today to explain what time is. But it's, again, we're coming from one concept we don't understand, opening up to new concepts of energy and time we don't understand. And energy is at least very ambitious to understand and explain as well. And time also. And I think I looked up some quotes before we recorded. And one thing is, here it is. Time is what keeps everything from happening at once. And at the very first, it sounds very flat. But again, talking before coming back to a more realistic talk, if you think of the universe as a singularity, which is very hard to grasp, you need the 3 dimensions, right? Space, to have anything being created at all out of the singularity. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. And what you just said is like, and then you need another limitation, which is called time, because otherwise everything would happen at once, and everything was and will have been, which is very hard to understand. So you need the creation of time and a sense of limitation, how we sense it, to
make
something.
sense, literally make sense, so you can compute, so your mind can compute, so you don't.
And this is actually what it is. This is really good that you say that. It's just for us, for our little computers up here, or here, or wherever they are, I don't know, to make sense of the sensory data we're taking in, right, from the 3D world. So actually, it's a concept, and anybody who had like read this stuff of The Power of Now. Now the name is gone. He is called Eckhart Tolle.
Eckhart Tolle, yeah.
And he's just very straightforward. It was saying is like, past is an illusion, future is an illusion, everything is now, and that's it.
Time is a flat circle, I tell my son. He's like, what?
That's the best. That's the best answer. I will make it a YouTube short.
I think it's that. I do think it's that. Yeah, that's why I love the example of the hat doing it towards the future. Like, again, the future is a word, something that is coming towards you. That's the future. We are now in the future, and now, right? But in the future from a certain perspective, because I said and now, right? No, it's always the now. So I think it's more. I think we agree in that sense that it's a concept to make sense of where you're coming from or where you are going, basically. Because if you say time is a flat circle, or in essence, the translation would be time is infinite, as in the now is infinite. It's always the now. Yeah, well, like, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, what do you do with that? Like, when do you want to meet? Now. Okay, now. Right? When did that happen? Now. You know, so that doesn't make sense.
And there's just one, it's an experiment from one of Eckhart Tolle's books. And it's just come into my mind. And this shows in a very simple way why time itself doesn't really exist. And it's only a concept we need, what we just said, to compute what's happening. And the experiment is quite simple. You just sit down and you watch what's happening, your thoughts. And 99.99% of the time, your mind is either in the past or in the future. And if you are able to sit and be in the present moment for more than 2 minutes, let's say 15 seconds, this is like probably like 5% of people can do that without having your mind wandering around. Like, and he really clearly says your mind only exists in the past or in the future. In the present moment, there is no mind and no thoughts. And this is really interesting. So, we bring it back to a little bit more normal talk, I would say. But time it's very profound. I think time is a concept we need for our computer to process the sensory data. This is actually what it is. And again, when we're on that level with processing and computers, I would argue that money itself is definitely a technology. So it's man-made. And so I would call it a technology. And we talked about that the technology we have today is broken. Or at least it was the best we could come up with so far, right? We saw that the time is stolen from people. We saw that issue. And if we now dive like into Bitcoin, where if we take the shortcut, there is a finite amount of units. There will never be more. And the units are created over time and over time. And by the year approximately 2140, right, the last set is mined. So then there will be 21 million Bitcoins in total, right? And it will never, ever be changed again. So from your point of view, once you have that new technology repairing the old system, which is like fumbling around with the amount of units you have, what would be the implications of like repairing the money technology?
So if you go back to the scale, right, you have the money, the reward for the productivity, the products and services that people or, well, I think the interesting question is, I don't know if people are going to make stuff in 100 years. Maybe that's for a different conversation. But conceptually, there's a creator of something, right? And there is a reward for that. And if the reward is finite, is stable, like a kilogram, like an hour, right? Just a stable unit, then if you want more of these units, you have to deliver more value, if that makes sense. So if more people are incentivized to deliver value and this side of the scale gets heavier, more things of value are being created, then or that represent value, right? Products and services, then the value of what these units represent goes up. So the purchasing power of each unit goes up as society or the world becomes more productive, can create more possible value. Does that make sense? So if you understand that Bitcoin has a finite supply and there will never be made more of as compared to any other type of asset in the world, right? There's more gold. People can actually, buy, create more homes. We can actually create more land, right? Look at Dubai with the islands, for example. The only thing in the world that if the demand increases, the supply cannot be increased is Bitcoin. So once you understand that Bitcoin is the hardest money, right? What they say, that hard money comes from it's difficult to create. So currently, Bitcoin is already the hardest, most scarce asset in the world, scarcer than gold. So there's more new gold percentage-wise created each year than Bitcoin, and each 4 years, the supply of Bitcoin or the new supply gets cut in half. So Bitcoin is already the hardest asset in the world. Once you understand that there's an absolute, verifiably finite supply, that's very important, right? So you cannot say how many gold there will be in the year 2100. You can do your own calculation, you as an individual, as to how many Bitcoin there will be in the year 2100, because that's very important. So it's absolute, verifiably scarce. Then you will also understand that when you understand that people move towards better money, like we talked about, and you already have examples of this, right? So for example, in the US, Canada, like border region, in Canada, there are Canadian stores where you can use US dollars to pay for stuff, and you get Canadian dollars in return. So these people know that, they want a stronger currency, which is the US dollar, and they give that in return. There's multiple examples of this also in history, where people move towards the better money, because if I have the strongest money, I can buy the most in the world. Literally what America is doing with their world reserve currency. And so once you understand that will happen anyway, and that has always happened, and that Bitcoin has an absolute, verifiably finite supply, then you will see that more and more people will start to move into Bitcoin. And when I'm saving my time and energy in Bitcoin, and I know that this is the hardest, most scarce money or asset to ever exist, and you propose a certain product or service that I can pay Bitcoin for, it has to be really, really valuable in order for me to part ways with my Bitcoin. And that incentivizes you to think about what I actually want, what the value is that I or other people actually want. And if you understand Bitcoin today, right, in 2025, you can already see that there are certain, I almost want to say, like values and principles that emanate from the people that understand Bitcoin. If I have a garden that I want to redo, whatever, or I want to build a swimming pool, whatever, and I call like 4 companies that could do that. If 3 of them propose to do it for euros or dollars, and 1 guy proposes to do it for Bitcoin, I'm going to go with the Bitcoin guy, because he understands the value of Bitcoin as a reward, which makes me understand that he understands, and so that he actually will deliver real value. Does that make sense? So
yeah, and then
people are
also,
incentivized to work harder, not in a bad way, but they are incentivized to figure out what is the greatest value that I could add to the world, right? So
this is what I want to say. I wouldn't translate it as they work harder, but they are
you're forced to think about it. You are forced to
they
a
are
degree.
forced to deploy more value to the community or to the world or whatever.
And that is outside, right? But before you can do that, you have to go inside. Like, okay, but what do I enjoy? What am I good at? Right? Like, what am I here to do, to contribute or to add to this world? And I think there are people that disagree with this, because this is not easy. This is very hard, I think, to figure that out. I think, we are both also still figuring this out, right? But introducing a hard reward like that, actually, I use the word force. I don't know another word. You could say incentivize, but it forces you to actually think about it. if you think about today, there are many people that have bullshit jobs or jobs they don't like, jobs that don't really add value. They just go there because they get money, so they can, keep afloat, stay alive, etc. And to tie that back to the little spiritual part that we talked about, how broken is that, right? So you just expend your time to, just because you have to, you don't really have another option, to get a reward that other people can create infinitely. And then you really don't have any time and space to really figure out, what am I here to do? And so in that sense, I use force when I talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoin will force you to do that, because there will be other people, in a free market of ideas and spirits and whatnot, that will be like, if I deliver more value and I ask Bitcoin in return, I am actually improving my life by applying my productivity, instead of applying my productivity into some sort of black hole of non-productiveness at some bullshit, job somewhere. So I don't have any judgment about that, but that is what the people are forced to do right now, actually. So in today, they're also forced to do stuff that they don't really want.
Yeah. And I think it's inevitable that you need to come up with really good ideas where you're really good at. Because otherwise you can't, let's say, compete is, some people see competition as a bad thing. I think it's a very good thing, because it brings out the very best for everybody. That's what I think. A positive competition, right?
Which eventually makes stuff cheaper. That's where the innovation comes from. If you are
no
forced,
competition,
competition, no innovation, a lot of very expensive stuff, right? And so, I agree. I sorry to interrupt, but so that's interesting, because a lot of people will trip over the words, right? But if you're listening to this and you're thinking about what you are actually spending your time and energy on, like, is that the thing you would, again, spend your finite time and energy on? If you've had the last week, even if there was like 2 days at your job where you were like, what the fuck am I doing here? That should be a signal to just rethink, like, okay, why am I doing this? What is it? Yeah.
And let's take one example. I guess you talk about that in your podcast from time to time with baking cookies. And I think this is such a simple, right? Such a simple explanation. You're just saying, we both open up a cookie shop, right? But for some reason, you sell a lot more cookies than I do.
Yeah.
Because
you suck.
they are more tasty and I suck.
Yeah.
So
and that's okay. That's totally okay. That's the whole point.
Okay. So it, again, let's call it, it forces me to look again inside where I could contribute more value. And I think that's something very healthy. And if you're talking about, I want to go more into the future, not where we are today or back in time. But if you have a system that rewards people for doing nothing, this distorts everything, right? So if you have a system today that distorts time and how you value your own time, it distorts everything, the whole journey of finding your purpose, and everything. So you can actually be rewarded. And this is something that really, I don't want to say it hurts me, but it's still, I'm really struggling with that. You can get the biggest rewards for ripping society apart.
Yep.
And
so
this
your
is
incentive is you have a perverse incentive, right? And I think this is great, because this is moving towards closing the circle of what we're talking about, right? For you to figure out, am I good at baking cookies or building chairs or homes or cars or whatever, you need time and space to try something out, right? And if you do that for the first time and you start a cookie store and you suck at baking cookies, naturally you should be forced to just kill the cookie store idea.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to make it. Yeah. Nowadays, we see a lot of zombie companies, right? They are just kept alive, or there's people that get subsidies and their store is kept alive. But that is so interesting when we talked about, the fake, nominal GDP productivity, stuff like that. No, you should quit your cookie store, which again is great because most ideas suck. Most ideas we have and try suck. So that's totally okay. But the problem here is that you, in this money system, don't have more space and time to readjust, to have a moment to reflect, to learn, like, okay, what went well, what didn't went well. Okay, I suck at baking cookies. What else? But I learned, like, setting up a shop and buying supplies and whatever. Okay, that's what I learned, but I still suck at making cookies, right? How else can I apply the learnings that I have in another venture or maybe a job or whatever? You need time and space to figure that out. And in a fiat money system, you don't have that. So either people go from job to job or failed company to failed company, or they are head of some type of zombie company, or they get depressed or overworked or burned out or whatever. And that is because if you saved up an amount of units, which is called capital, right? You save up an amount of units, which is capital that you can deploy to do something, to build something. If you don't have the opportunity or the possibility with the technology of money to do that several times, you will never figure out what you are here to do in the best way possible. Whereas
you're trapped.
Yes. Whereas with Bitcoin, because that appreciates in purchasing power over time, because more and more people move towards this better money, as we talked about. If you use Bitcoin as your capital and you basically create time towards the future, that sounds very weird, right? But you create time and space to try something. Let's say you try something for a year. You try the cookie store, you still suck, you still fail. Because your capital is in Bitcoin and it increased in purchasing power, you're, to make it simple, maybe at the exact same place where you started a year ago when you started the cookie store in terms of the amount of purchasing power you have. So you didn't lose anything. In that scenario, you only gained knowledge and learning and experience by failing. So we allow failing with Bitcoin as capital.
One thing is very, very, very important at that point, because some people who didn't spend time in the Bitcoin world will actually say, this stuff those two guys are talking about is actually crap. But what's very interesting, and it's Jeff Booth theory, right, is that, technology is already there. We have AI, we have all that stuff. Everything is accelerating. Everything is, in theory, getting cheaper because technology is getting better. That effect is already there. And the only thing why we don't see it is because the current money system is broken, right? So the technology gets better and better, so things get easier and easier to deploy. That's normal. We're already there today. Yes. But it's hidden. This effect is hidden today, right? So by repairing the money system, everybody would see that, everybody would feel that. So it's no like science fiction nonsense or utopian nonsense. It's just like the natural state of how a system would work with a stable money system. So if we consider money as some sort of technology, so we agree money is technology. A, it's man-made. B, the better technology will succeed on the long term. It's like you wouldn't use a Nokia phone probably today when you have an iPhone. It doesn't make any sense. And you see technology, it's like it's no one-way street. So we create technology, but technology changes us on so many levels, on behavioral level, on also on a perception level. This is when preparing this episode, I thought like, okay, money is technology that is tied to time. Where did we see, like in the past, technologies that actually shifted our perception fundamentally? And if you not go into time, but into space, we had like two inventions. For us, they are normal, but there were times they were not normal, is the microscope and the telescope. So you actually increase the realm we are living in drastically.
Yeah. Cool. That's a good
Right?
example.
So it actually changed, this technology changed the perception of space in a massive way. How we behave, how we do science, how we do medicine, like everything. And if you're talking about time, we have the invention of the clock, which shifted a lot. It shifted like worldwide behavior. It's very closely tied together with the calendar, which used to be the moon, right? The moon and just the seasons. Now we have the clock. So it changed. It made us actually more productive, probably because you can make better agreements. And so if we see that, and one thing is also very interesting, is the photo. The invention of the photography changed our perception about past. Because you had pictures of the past that hadn't been there. It was just stories so far, right? And if we talk about money, that is definitely a technology, that's definitely tied to time. What do you think? How will it change our perception of time? Like the calendar, like the clock, like the photo.
Wow. I had to think of maybe one thing to add. I had to think of, because maybe we should unpack the Jeff Booth thing a bit. The
deflationary.
Yeah, but also what you just said. Like, I think every technological advancement eventually helps us to coordinate better with ourselves and each other to eventually create more technological advancements, right? Like, I usually also think about it as it's basically every new technology is a way to condense energy or information in a smaller package that can be distributed further. So more people can make use of it. Therefore, they can travel further, or information can travel further, and therefore ideas can travel further, and therefore more new stuff is created, built upon the previous technology, and so on and so on. And so, if we think about how do we optimize coordination with people, we can also say, like, how can we be more productive or more effective, basically. And I think that's eventually the goal of why humans are into constant innovation, basically constant making stuff more efficient, etc. Because we want to increase the accessibility of that technology to more people, so we can accelerate even further and coordinate even better. Until, it's funny, I got this from Joe Rogan, but he says, and that ties into your question, that, and I don't know how he came to that, but I like to follow this train of thought, until, like, our labor isn't really necessary anymore.
Yeah.
If the machines or the technology does all the work to keep us alive, well, you could say a lot about that too, but if we have enough time and space, because we don't have to put that to physical work to provide a basic level of life necessities, then we can put our brain power or our intellect towards understanding what is actually going on here, right? And I usually, I know you're deep in that rabbit hole as well, but I'm really deep into, like, the ancient civilization, consciousness, and the whole, astronomy and stuff like that. When I think about, like, hunter-gatherers, tell me if you don't follow me, okay? When I think about, like, hunter-gatherers, right? Like, the women are with the babies, the men are out fighting the saber-toothed tiger or whatever. Like, they're trying to get the food, right? They're taking risking their lives to get back, hunting and gathering, literally. The first time there was a surplus of food stored by using certain technologies and skills that they developed over time to store food for a longer time, or create a more protective camp, or whatever. At one moment when there was a surplus, there were people that were hunting and gathering before, but they didn't have to come along with the hunting and the gathering. So their time, they had free time that they could apply to something else. And that's eventually also how the civilization started, etc., because people could do jobs and be productive in a way that that wasn't necessarily connected to the gathering of food, i.e., keeping everyone alive, right? So they could be productive in a non-food or surviving way. And when I think about that, like when I think about, okay, what would be the first thing that people would want to figure out when they would reach that point for the first time? Okay, tomorrow, Patrick, you don't have to come hunt and gather, right? Like, what would you do? Like, what would you focus your attention on? Yeah. And my idea, and I wonder what you think, is that they would look up and be like, what the hell is going on here? Like, I need to understand. Yeah. I need to understand why the sun comes up there and then it disappears there. And then there's like this fucking theater of stars, and there's this whole show. But that star is always there, and those move. And then, over a longer time period, however they thought of time, it was really hot, and then it rained, and then it snowed, and then 3 children died. And then there was rain and sun again. And then the leaves fell off the tree, and then there was snow again. Like, what the hell? What is this? Is this a 1 time, 2 time? Like, how many times does this happen, right? So just the understanding of where am I actually? Like, what the hell is this? And this is a whole nother conversation, but I think, there are many people that think that the people before us way back had actually figured this out and understood this, and this is some knowledge that we don't have anymore. But I think this is what we are talking about, is a way to get there again. So if we have an advancement of technology that can actually help us create time and space on one side, in a technological sense, and we have a money that also helps us to give ourselves the time and space to do that job collectively, perhaps, I think that would be very beneficial to humanity in general. Like, for me, that's a very positive thought. I hope this is an answer to your question, but that's kind of what I think is like the innovation in technology is just a never ending thing. And now with AI, it's going to be like AI is building AIs and robots building robots quicker and quicker. Like, no idea, like ideas aren't unique in general, but now no idea is unique anymore. Like, I use this as an example. I can take a picture of this, put it in ChatGPT probably now, and it can one shot a 3D render of this thing. I look up some person with a 3D printer, and I have this tomorrow, right? So just the fact that I'm not doing this means I still paid 40 euros for this bottle, but in 5 years, maybe I can make this at home. So that is only going to accelerate. Like no idea is going to be unique anymore. All the ideas will be democratized. AI will be democratized. So that productivity gain will go to people, but we have to capture the value that creates. And if advanced technology is a deflationary force, right? Things become cheaper and more accessible. I think the best example is, that picture where they load up like one of the first computers, like on a plane, that they have like a forklift, and there's like it's like a container, and they put it into a plane, and this thing is like, I don't know, $10 million or something. This thing is 10,000 times more powerful and costs, a percentage of what that cost at that time. And that's the whole point, is that the technology becomes more accessible, more cheap. So that's a deflationary force. But if you price that deflation in a money that is inflationary, then you can kind of like see which battle is going on. And if our grandparents bought, a bread for 20 cents or an apple for 10 cents, and we now think that's a joke, right? it's not a joke, because we're kind of like going backwards in time, because the bread now is €4 and an apple is maybe 1 or 2 euros, right? So it's more expensive. But when you think about, does it cost like more energy from the sun to grow an apple? Or do you think in the past 60 years we've become more productive or better at making bread? For that last question, the answer is probably yes. I don't know bread making tech, but my assumption is we have become better at making bread. Why do you need more euro or dollar units to buy that bread, right? So this is the battle that's going on, and this force down is going to accelerate at an accelerating pace. And that is why we need Bitcoin to measure those gains in, because only then we can actually have a benefit from the increased productivity that this technological advancements are giving us, which eventually gives us the time and space to figure out what we
the
are
image
doing.
you just created is like perfect, because you have like this, right?
Yeah, they're fighting.
And just imagine this is gone. And this is actually what's going to happen. Like the downforcing force is gone. Yeah. And this is what will happen with collaboration and with thriving.
No, it's the other way around. It's the other way around. So this is the tech and this is the money. So if the inflationary, so then everything goes down, the tech gets democratized, people get more access, right? And they can build upon and build upon and build.
Yeah,
basically.
For me, this was productivity and this was the money forcing down. But I get what you mean.
One. Yeah, you can do it like that too. Yeah, it's stopping it. Yeah.
one closing thought, and I think this wraps it up pretty well. If you think that you have a tribe, like way back, and the first thing that happened with a little surplus would be that you would have a guy or a woman called a shaman. One person whose job it was to understand everything, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I'm totally with you. Only with the surplus, you can spend your energy on stuff that's not necessary to survive. Yeah. And now you have a tribe of 100 people. You had only one person. And now you have 100 people working together on figuring out what that is. So you could definitely say that Bitcoin, once it enters as a monetary system, would be one of the biggest shifts in consciousness that we have ever seen. Ever. And the acceleration is so big that you can't even imagine it. Because, of course, some people will really struggle with that stuff. Nothing to do, no distraction anymore, like a hamster on your daily life. Mm-hmm. But just imagine the power is like either you have one shaman or you have 100 shamans figuring out who they are in that world. Yeah. And I think this is actually what this monetary tech is going to do, also with the perception of time. And actually, I would even go so far that it's a kind of consciousness technology, because this will be the biggest acceleration for consciousness we've ever seen.
I would agree. I'm trying to look up a tweet. If you give me 1 second, let me see. Yeah, I have a tweet that says hardest money ever plus AI plus decentralized media plus spiritual development is a renaissance. And that is really what I think that this is, right? So hardest money ever is Bitcoin. We have AI that we just mentioned, which is going to be democratized over time. More people have access. It's going to be free. If you think about the state of AI today, it will never be worse than this. And it's mind-blowing every day already, right? So think about that. In 5 years, the level of AI that you have right now will probably be free, which is enough to utilize, for crazy stuff already. Decentralized media, like the whole centralization of media and how people get information is also gone. I mean, we have Nostr, we have to a certain degree X still, but I think that's happening. And then, the spiritual part, I think, is connected to what we talked about. Like I wonder what you think, but I think you would agree that we are guided by our place in the universe, like where we are in the bigger constellation of the universe influences how our meat bodies are working or are receiving the information that exists in the ether or the eternal consciousness or infinite consciousness, however you call it. And I think more people are receiving that, and so these developments are aligning, I think, in a very interesting way, which will hopefully bring us to I think the word is renaissance. I don't know what it looks like, but I think we could, and maybe it's utopian. Some people will find it utopian, right? But we could use this technology to actually improve our understanding of the human experience and the physical beings that we are. So that is the outlook that I'm following, because I think that's also the most positive one, which makes me enthusiastic about the future, which also makes me want to try to lower my anxiety towards the future so I can actually see what's going to happen in the future. Yeah.
Perfect. That's perfect last words. Let's wrap that up with 2 5-minute games really quick.
Okay.
If you have gone down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you know how it transforms your thinking and your life. But then something strange happens. Suddenly, your friends and family can't follow. You start seeing the world differently, and it gets lonely. That's why I created Satori Island, a curated community for people who believe Bitcoin could change more than just the economy. If you feel this revolution runs deeper, touching how we live, how we grow, how we relate to each other and to the world, then this is your invitation. Many of us feel the same, excited but isolated. Satori Island is where that changes. A shared space for learning, co-creating, and personal growth. Yes, we talk about Bitcoin, but also about what comes next, how we as humans and as a society evolve in the face of AI, robotics, and the deep systemic change. We explore personal health, spiritual development, and philosophy. Not as experts, but as people with questions. Go to satoriisland.com or just send me a message on X. I reply personally. And if you are a Bitcoin creator yourself, you know the effort it takes. Hours of content, weeks of research, sharing your heart and your mind. And yet, sometimes it's hard to truly connect with your audience. It's hard to interact and to learn from them, and even harder to build something sustainable from it. That's why I'm looking for 3 to 5 creators who feel this too and want to build something meaningful together. No big following required, no perfect plan, just vision, honesty, and the willing to build something real. So the idea behind that game called 21 Echoes is I have a list of 21 words that are very close tied to the topics I discuss in the podcast. And based on what we discussed today, I will give you a few words. We start with 5, and you just give me the first associated word, one word that comes to your mind when I tell you that word.
Okay.
So the first one is time.
Freedom.
Energy.
Movement.
Wealth.
Authority.
Consciousness.
You.
Past.
Wow. Gone.
Okay, now we have 3 more words, and now you can respond with a full sentence instead of one word.
Okay.
The first word is future.
Something I'm super excited for.
Bitcoin.
Something I'm even more excited for.
Truth.
An anchor in your reality.
Okay. Thank you very much. And then we're entering the next 5 minutes game. So the idea about that whole podcast is about time traveling, sending messages back and forth in time. So I receive messages from my granddaughter in the year 2140. So we do a little bit of time traveling as well. It's not that far. It's not 100 years. But if you think you could send a message back in time to your 7-year-old self, what would that be?
Wow. I think it would. I think I'm following what I'm going to say, but I would invite my 7-year-old self to realize that you will never know everything, but that doesn't mean you should never be curious, because there is something that you can learn every day that you can apply to understand your experience of life a little bit better. And although more knowledge sometimes makes it more difficult, that's the entire point of the experience that you're living. So I would say that the more you learn and the more you think about it, you could have more anxiety about the things that you don't know. But I think it's actually finding strength and calm in the things that you do know, because that will actually help you to live the extraordinary opportunity that you've been given to a higher degree. Yeah.
That's cool. And if we reverse the time messaging, and now you could send a message or a question, depends what you want to do, to your grandchild in the year 2140, what would you ask or tell?
I have to think about the meme. You know, the meme where they say, like, why did we get so rich? It's because your grandfather just was the crazy guy standing in the desert talking about Bitcoin. No, I think I think that, you know, how I'm looking at the future and where Bitcoin is going will prove that I was right in my research and my diligence and my reflection and my enthusiasm for what Bitcoin is. And I think the lesson that they could draw from that is that you need to think for yourself, and that you can think for yourself, and that it's actually a very rewarding journey if you are working on understanding yourself better every day, if that makes sense. So, I mean, I made a decision. My bet, although it's not a bet, is on Bitcoin, and I've done that not in a random way, but by actually doing the work. And I'm going to stand by it because I want to see if I'm right. And the only person I want to prove it to is myself. And I think that is already enough. And I hope that's an inspiration for them.
Okay, so was that a message? Or
I don't
just a
know.
statement that Bitcoin is going through the roof?
I don't know. I don't know if that's a message. The message is, if I'm right, then that is what you can take away from that. I don't know. It's a hard question. Hard exercise. I think my main point I want to make is that you should think for yourself. You should try to make your decisions in the most conscious way possible, although you also have to accept at the same time that you don't know everything. So there's always a little risk, but that is okay. The only person you have to be responsible for to that degree to making that decision is yourself. And whatever other people say, you can take as information, but you only follow your own decision. I don't know, maybe that's more a message.
Yeah, that's cool. And to make it even more freaky, you can ask a question to my grandchild, to June.
Yeah.
And by the time I publish the episode, the answer will be at the very end of the episode. So if you want to know how life is in the year 2140, you can ask the freakiest question you ever wanted to know what's going on, and we will figure out how it is.
I would love to know what people do for fun in 2140.
Okay. We'll figure that out.
Could be freaky, I don't know.
Or it's like so down to earth that we think like, that's like...
Or maybe everything is fun, right? Yeah.
Everything is fun, yeah. And maybe I also additionally send a definition of what time is. I need to think about that. But fun is a very good question. So Bram, thank you very, very much. Again, I guess the best channel to find you is Twitter probably, right?
Yes.
X, sorry.
Yes, I'm at Bramk, BRAMK. Yeah.
Okay. Any Bitcoin for Millennials is your podcast. And I will really, really recommend if you're now interested in Bitcoin at all, start with Bitcoin for Millennials and watch at least 40 episodes. That's my recommendation.
Go for it. Thanks, man.
Hey, Bram, thanks for your question. It made me smile because honestly, it's one we ask each other here too, just in different ways. So, what do people do for fun in 2140? We play, but it's not always the kind of play you'd recognize. Sometimes it's still games. Yes, we still love puzzles, story arcs, and physical challenges, but more often, play here means flow. We've designed our lives to make room for the kind of engagement that lights you up from the inside. Last week, I spent 2 days inside a resonance dome. It's this soft, open geodesic space where you tune into sound fields generated by real-time emotional feedback. You don't compete, you co-create. My friend Elu and I were trying to weave a song out of our shared tension, and something clicked. The whole dome glowed when we hit harmonic coherence. It felt like truth, and we laughed until we cried. That's fun here, getting into sync with others, feeling known, letting your nervous system breathe. We also dance, a lot. And we sculpt rituals from everyday life. One group in Nodia recently hosted a 12-hour meme translation festival, basically decoding ancient 2020s memes and trying to embody their humor in physical movement. And sure, there are still thrill seekers, people who dive off cloud harbors in glider suits or challenge each other in cryptographic escape rooms. But most of us are drawn toward joy that feels like home in the body. Fun is less about escape and more about expansion. Here in 2140, fun looks a little different than it used to. You know how so much of the fun in your time came from competition? Like football, baseball, stuff where it really mattered who won? That kind of fun doesn't play a big role anymore. We still move our bodies, we still gather in circles, but it's not about teams or scoring or proving something. It's more like play for the sake of play. But even humor has changed. There's way less humor at the expense of others. Sarcasm and mockery, those used to be so common they were basically social glue, right? Now they kind of sting too much to be funny. We still tease, but it's more gentle, more about affection than hierarchy. I think most of what's funny to us now wouldn't land at all in your time. It's more about unexpected coherence, like when a child says something that accidentally cracks open a deep truth, or when a pattern shows up in nature that mirrors something you just felt. We laugh because of how beautiful and weird it all is. Fun here isn't scarce. Talk soon, Grandpa, and thank you, Bram. That question brought me joy. I'm heading to the North Gardens tomorrow to help set up a new interspecies storytelling dome with Lyra. We'll send another message your way in 3 days.